Today I am making my most popular recipe, which is my no-knead focaccia with a garlic confit and rosemary topping. For the home cook, making bread from scratch can seem extremely intimidating or terrifying if you especially haven't done it before. But this no-knead focaccia is foolproof and anyone can make it. I promise. It is really, really easy. You do need a little bit of special equipment like a digital scale. That one is non-negotiable, I'm afraid, and I will tell you why later. A thermometer, you can get away without using this. And then you just need some easy, simple, round-the-house equipment like a bowl and a measuring cup, and then just some flour and yeast. All right, so we are gonna jump into making our bread. It is absolutely pouring outside where I live, and it is the perfect day to make bread because it's so cozy and comforting. And you'll probably notice that I am pregnant, so I have been craving carbs like you would not believe. So we're gonna start by measuring out all of our ingredients. And the best way for me to understand bread making is by using something called a baker's percentage. So a focaccia is a very hydrated dough. It can go up to 100% hydration, but we're going to be doing 80% hydration today because 100% is very, very wet, and that would be hard for us to handle with our hands. And because we're not using something special like a stand mixer, I'm just going to drop it down a little to about 80-85%, which is still actually a traditional focaccia hydration. So that just means that we have 100% flour. That's where you always start with your baker's percentage. And then we work out from how much flour we have, what 80% of that would be. And that's just how you work out your hydration. So we have 80% hydration. And I'm just gonna refer to my little bread baking Bible. We are gonna do 680 grams water and 700 grams flour. So you'll see that is really, really hydrated. And we want to be using lukewarm water because I'm using instant dry yeast, which means it's a dormant yeast and it needs to be activated. I have made this recipe so many times and I have measured it out in cups and it changes absolutely every time. So to be consistent and to be precise, I really, really recommend doing it in grams and using a scale to measure everything out, including the water, even all the way down to that 2 grams of salt that we need. So we need 680 grams of water. Okay, so we're gonna measure out that water, and I'm gonna use a thermometer because we want the water to be at the perfect temperature so we don't kill the yeast in water that's too hot, and we don't use water that's too cool so the yeast won't activate it. We want it sitting around, I think it's like 30 to 34 degrees Celsius. Ah, perfect, this is 30. Let's put that into measure. And I'm actually gonna measure my water in grams. So you'll be wondering why I'm not doing it in milliliters, but because of the baker's percentage, we want it to be in grams as the same as the flour. There we go, 680, perfect. And I am using dry yeast today. This is the yeast I use in all of my bread making recipes. And you'll see that it looks like these little dry particles, and you'll be able to smell that yeasty smell straight away, which I don't know, I love that smell. It reminds me of, you know you're gonna have a cozy, warm piece of bread coming out of the oven soon. So I'm just gonna grab a whisk and I'm gonna get my honey, which I forgot. And the reason I'm using honey, you could use sugar or maple syrup if you wanna keep it vegan, is because that's gonna help the yeast feed on it to activate it, and it also just flavors it a little bit. So it just gives it that nice little sweet flavor. And you only want about 2 grams of that. Let me just whisk it. Just whisk it until it's really well combined. And I'm gonna set it to the side and leave that for about 5 minutes, and we'll know that that yeast is alive or that it's active when we start to see it froth at the top. I'll show you exactly what I mean. I'm avoiding using the word bubbling because this is bubbles and you might think, oh, that's active. But no, we need to let it sit for 5 minutes. If you're using yeast from a packet like this, it is 99% of the time going to be an active yeast, but it is always best to check because I have made doughs before that haven't risen because the yeast has been dead. Now onto the flour. So we need, I'm gonna refer to my bread Bible again. We need 700 grams, which I have a note written down there that that's roughly 5 cups. But again, please don't do this in cups. Please try and do it in grams because it changes absolutely every time I make it. So I'm using a baker's flour today, but you can use an all-purpose flour as well. I've made many focaccias with just plain all-purpose flour and it's turned out delicious. Ooh, $6.99. I did well then. And then we want to add 2 grams of salt. So just a fine table salt. And then I'm just going to whisk that all together. So I'm going to check on my yeast, and that is looking perfect. This is exactly what we want to see to tell us that our yeast is alive and active, which means we're going to get a beautifully risen and bubbly focaccia. So let's throw that in with the flour. Now you could use a spatula or a wooden spoon to mix this through, but I'm going to use my hands because whenever I'm making a dough, it really comes down to the feel for me. It tells me so much about where my dough is sitting, if it's sitting at the right consistency, if it needs a little more flour, a little more water. It is important to really get that touch and feel of it. And then you'll even get to a point where you just know exactly what to feel for. So I'm just gonna work it around the sides to get off as much as I can from the bowl. So I'm gonna cover this and leave it to sit for 10 minutes just to allow that gluten to stretch out a bit more. And then we're gonna do a quick fold. We've let that focaccia sit for 10 minutes, and now we're just gonna do a bit of a stretch and a fold. And this is the first stretch and fold that we're doing. Now, because this is really hydrated, best to wet your hands a little. Now we're gonna grab the side, pull it up, and fold it over. So stretch and fold. I'm gonna do that about 4-6 times, and you'll see it's starting to shape into a really nice ball here. And just rotate the bowl as you're moving from the edge of each focaccia. So look at it as though it's in a grid of 4s. So you've got this end, fold that one over, rotate it, do this one, rotate it, that one, and then finally the last one. And I've got my damp tea towel. You can use plastic wrap as well if you like. We're just gonna cover that, leave it rest for 10 minutes, and then we're gonna repeat that process. So we've let that rest for 10 minutes, and we're just gonna repeat that stretch and fold. I'm gonna get my hands a little bit wet again. So again, going from the corners, and you can give it a little shake when you pull it up. You'll see that's moving into a really nice ball now. And now, the star of the show, olive oil. So this is our first little drizzle of olive oil, or should I say big drizzle of olive oil. I'm just gonna put it on top, probably about 2 tablespoons. I'm just gonna work it down the sides as well. And then look at how glossy and soft that is. This is exactly the texture and consistency that we're looking for. So I'm gonna cover it with plastic wrap. We wanna cover it really, really well this time. You could use a tea towel, but I really suggest using plastic wrap because that's gonna allow no air to get inside it. And then we're gonna pop it in the fridge for 24 hours, which I know seems like a long time, but that is just where, that's called the first proof. So this is where the gluten is going to be absorbed, and it's going to expand, and it's going to double in or even triple in size. And it's going to give you that beautiful bubbly inside texture that you're familiar with focaccias. This is exactly what your focaccia should look like after 24 hours of proofing in the fridge. And that is the first proof. You'll see that it's risen, it's doubled, if not tripled in size. It could have gone a lot bigger if I had a bigger bowl. And look at how beautiful that bubbly inside texture is. And you could actually grease the plastic wrap so it doesn't stick like this, but this isn't an issue. And look at how jiggly it is. I just love that about focaccia. Okay, so now we are going to transfer it to our baking tin. I am using quite a deep dish baking tray. You can use a sheet pan, which I have seen a lot of cooks make focaccia that way, but I actually like when it's a little bit thicker. I think it makes for better sandwiches, and I'm also going to make this into a sandwich, so I'll show you how to do that once it's baked. This is 24 centimeters by 35 centimeters, and it's quite deep. I have pre-lined it with baking paper. Usually I wouldn't do this, but my baking tray has lost its stick for some reason, and whenever I've been baking my bread in it, I've had to scrape it out with a knife. So the baking paper is just a sure way that it's not going to stick, but it kind of does lose a little tiny bit of that crispy bottom, but it still comes out just as good. All right, so we're just gonna drop that in here. But first of all, I'm gonna drizzle a really hefty amount of olive oil on the bottom because, as I said, that's gonna give it that crispy golden bottom. Ooh, it's looking so good. Now we're just gonna stretch out the dough to the edges. You don't have to stretch it all the way out. And look, you'll just see how beautiful and gassy that dough is because it's already starting to form some lovely, iconic focaccia bubbles. Just gonna do a little drizzle. And now we're gonna cover it and I'm gonna do its second proof. But I'm gonna do the second proof in a warm spot in the house because that's just gonna allow that focaccia to rise. It won't double in size, but it will come up pretty high in the pan. And you can do that in a warm room. If it's a warm day in your house, put it in the warmest room in the house. Or a little trick if you're making bread in winter is to put it in the oven with just the light on. That will be the perfect temperature to proof your focaccia dough in. So I'm gonna cover it with a damp tea towel this time, and then I'm gonna leave it to proof for 2 to 3 hours or until I can see that it's risen up just enough to where we're gonna dimple it and bake it in the oven. While my focaccia is doing its second proof, I'm gonna make the topping, which is a garlic confit and rosemary topping. So we need lots of garlic and lots of olive oil for that garlic confit. And I'm just gonna separate the cloves from the garlic. Probably about 1 to 2 bulbs would be enough because we're also going to cook that garlic in olive oil that's going to infuse it with a beautiful garlic flavor. And we're going to use that on the focaccia as well when it bakes because it needs a lot of olive oil on top and it's just going to be so delicious. I think 1 bulb's probably enough. I've pulled all those garlic cloves away from the bulb and I've popped them in a heat-proof bowl, and that's because I'm going to pour boiling hot water over them, let it sit for about 5 minutes, and then that skin is just going to slide off the garlic. And that's my little trick to how I peel so much garlic with ease. Got all our peeled garlic, and I've just got a mini tiny little Dutch oven that's in the shape of a heart. It's so cute. It's because I love you all. It's so cheesy. But I'm going to drop my garlic in there, submerge it in olive oil, and then slow cook it for about an hour just because we're doing a really small batch today. But this is the perfect amount that we need for our no knead focaccia. I'm just going to season it with a little bit of salt and then get that olive oil in there and fully submerge it in olive oil. And we just want to bring it to a really low simmer. So you just want that olive oil to have a slight bubble when it's cooking. That's probably about a cup of olive oil, I'd say. And you can do this uncovered or covered. It doesn't really make much of a difference. I just like to do it covered because this is the cutest bowl ever. And it goes in the oven for about 50 minutes to 60 minutes. That garlic confit has been baking for 1 hour at 140, 150 degrees Celsius. It is caramelized, it is soft, it is buttery, it is sweet, and I'm going to show you just how beautiful it is. And then this is the texture that we are looking for. Look at how beautiful that is. It's going to go great on our focaccia as the perfect focaccia topping. That focaccia has had its second proof for 2 to 3 hours in a warm spot in my house. I put it in my daughter's room with the heater on because it is a bit of a cold day today. And let's have a look. Ooh, it has risen beautifully. It looks delicious. Let's do the jiggle test. Oh, we got a good jiggle happening. This is my favorite part of making focaccia or any dough in general, and that is called dimpling the dough. And that gives the focaccia its iconic look, those little grooves in the top of it, and it just makes it so perfect. So to do that, I'm actually going to oil my hands slightly, which acts as a great moisturizer as well, but it also just means our fingertips aren't going to stick to the dough. And now we are going to dimple. That looks so good. You can tell this dough is just beyond perfect because it's got those iconic focaccia bubbles. And I know I keep using the word iconic, but there's so many things about focaccia that just make it so special that everyone knows it for. And it's those dimples, the bubbles, and that beautiful golden crust. And to get that, we're going to use lots of olive oil, but we're going to use our garlic confit olive oil, so it's got that beautiful garlic flavor throughout. And then just drizzle about maybe 2 to 3 tablespoons on there, probably 2 actually. And now I'm going to slot the garlic into all those little grooves. We've got all our garlic confit on there, and now I'm just going to finish it off with a little fresh rosemary and a little sprinkling of sea salt. So just remove the rosemary sprigs from the stem, we don't want that on there. And now for the final touch, a bit of sea salt, and that is perfect. So now we're going to bake it. I think I do it at 180, 190 degrees Celsius for about 30 minutes, or until that top is golden and crusty and it is just cooked to perfection. I've pulled the focaccia out of the oven and it's got that gorgeous golden crispy outside layer. I'm feeling it, and it's got a beautiful spring to it, which tells me the interior is soft and fluffy, and it looks absolutely perfect. So I'm just going to take it out of the baking tin. So I've got it on my cooling rack. Ooh, that looks so good. I'm just going to remove the baking paper, but as I said before, it's better to cook it without the baking paper, but this is just sort of a plan B or foolproof way for it to not stick to your baking tin. Now look at how beautiful that looks. Oh, that crust. And then I'll slice into it once I let it sit for about 5 more minutes, because it's a little bit hot, it might fall apart. I've let that cool for about 10 minutes. It's still nice and warm, but there is nothing better than warm bread in my opinion. Oh, perfect, perfect, perfect. And look at that. Nice and squishy and crunchy. And that is a great looking focaccia. Now that we have all of that beautiful, fresh, no knead focaccia that I've made, I'm going to show you how to turn it into a really quick, but one of my favorite sandwiches, which is a bit of an Italian deli style sandwich, using up meats, cheeses, olives, just stuff that you always have in the fridge. So let's cut into that. And look at that. You'll see that the focaccia really held its form, and that's from all that stretching that we did to shape and further structure the dough, and the fermenting and the proofing. So this is a really good quality bread to make a sandwich with. This is the ultimate sandwich for the garlic girl, because we've got garlic on top, the garlic infused olive oil, and I'm also going to use a little leftover garlic confit to spread onto that sandwich. On my sandwich, I'm going to put a layer of garlic confit, followed by some burrata, and then some beautiful garlic confit homemade pesto. I've then got some beautiful deli meats like prosciutto and salami, some rocket that's dressed with balsamic olive oil, shaved pecorino, salt and pepper, and then some olives to finish it off. Okay, and then we're going to top it off. Give it a little bit of a smush. Now let's cut into it. And there you have it, my no knead focaccia, which I also showed you how to turn into a really simple yet delicious sandwich. And you'll just see it's got that beautiful golden crispy outside layer, that beautiful soft and fluffy interior, that gorgeous garlic confit on top, and you just cannot beat this recipe. It's so easy to make. Anyone can make it, even you, and I promise if you've never made bread before, this is the perfect recipe to begin with. So if you liked this recipe, please like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you've made it. I always love to hear about you cooking my recipes at home. Thanks for watching. The perfect sandwich.